Report. Well, hi, Robin. Thank you for making time in the morning. Thanks for meeting me and thanks agreeing to the interview for the Tech Diplomacy Network. So today I'm speaking to Dr. Robin Michael Garcia, a Shanghai-trained political scientist, academic, and public affairs advisor. He's the founder of We Are Advisory Group and the president of the research company We Are Numero Research. And I had the honor to meet Robin before online already in the US when you were based in the US for the first 3 months of this year. And thanks for agreeing to this interview. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, of course, to the Tech Diplomacy Network. I know that you're doing a great job in, bridging diplomacy, government, technology, all over the world. And I'm excited to hear about the upcoming activities. But I'm also going to be based in the US again for quite maybe a couple of weeks. In November, I'll be based at the University of Pennsylvania.
Fantastic. I'll make sure to come and see you. Well, I'm going to drive right into my questions. On the emerging technology and policy landscape in the Philippines. So in 2021, your company spearheaded a forum, Digitalizing the Philippines, with Anata Grace Poe. You brought together key players in technology and stakeholders in the digital space and policymakers. So in that context, in that digitalization context, where does the Philippines stand as of now? What are the strengths or weaknesses in the transformation process?
Yeah, so very quickly, at the firm, at WR Advisory, we're a public affairs firm. We basically advise governments, we advise the private sector, electoral aspirants, help them navigate the social political world using data analytics, using strategy and communications. So in 2021, one of the things that we did was to bring together stakeholders from the private sector, from the government, the regulatory agencies, the biggest banks, as well as some of the biggest tech companies like Huawei and Bank of Philippine Islands, one of the oldest banks in Asia, actually. So what came out of that really is, are a lot of things. Number one, in the Philippines, you have a huge technology gap, right? We don't have enough digital technologies to support the growing population who uses digital and frontier technologies. And that's demonstrated by the fact that we have the internet connection is not quite good in the Philippines. It's very costly as well. The internet penetration is not that high. It's around 60-70%, and they're mainly focused in urban areas. So there's a technology gap in the Philippines. But the second thing that came out of that forum is that the technology gap is also a big factor why we had a technology gap are policy-oriented, are political economy considerations, and political and bureaucratic considerations. By that, I mean that the Philippines has a gap as well in terms of attracting foreign direct investments for competition. We recently just passed a law that would liberalize the telecommunications agency, but the telecommunications industry rather. But that's just a few months ago. I think around a year. And so we're really still waiting for the effects of that. But the point is, the telecommunications industry in the Philippines that serves the backbone for digital technologies and digital access is not competitive, and it's very inefficient because of political considerations. So it's protected by political interests. And so that's where you see the interplay of technology and policy and politics. The other thing that came out of it is the weak bureaucracy that we have. We have issues with cybersecurity. We have issues with the bureaucracy regulating the telecommunications sector. You also have issues with expertise and things like that. So these are the big things that really came out. It's really legislation, it's policy, it's bureaucracy, it's a technology gap. But you also have to understand that the Philippines is, cast in the context of Southeast Asia, and a lot of Southeast Asian countries, or the ASEAN countries, have post-colonial histories. The effect of that post-colonial history to our social landscape is that there are elites who are entrenched in the business sector, and who are able to influence policy and therefore have the industry protected against foreign competition. And it's only recently that we're trying to open up. Other countries have already opened up, like Vietnam, Indonesia. But in general, Southeast Asia is still has a protectionist political economy. So that's something that we need to contend with. We understand that digital is one of the important ways forward towards achieving economic growth. It has been a buzzword for a lot of electoral aspirants, for politicians, and for policymakers. And so there's that recognition that we have to push forward with the policy reforms, and that companies need to become ambassadors to explain to Philippine policymakers the need to push for these reforms and what those reforms might be.
Robin, may I ask the question, because you've been very clear on the three basically takeaways from the forum. Is it, in that clarity, was it your takeaways, or was it really as clearly discussed, which is a huge achievement, I suppose, in that clarity to discuss pain points in that development? Just to learn how sort of the communication culture is around pain points like that.
Right. So during the forum, we invited members of the academe, economists. We invited the CEO of the biggest bank, the vice president of a global ICT company, and the CEO of another tech company, as well as policymakers. So a lot of these people outside of government sent this message to the government in attendance, right? So there are two main government agencies relevant to digitalization. You have the Department of Trade and Industry, or DTI, and you have the Department of Information Communications Technology. So they were in attendance. The message was sent loud and clear to them that they had to reform, that these are the gaps. And so many people attended that forum, actually. Around 500 guests were there.
Yes. And you did it pretty much just after COVID, right, in 2021. Are you planning on doing it again, sort of in the next phase? How basically, like, how structurally are you moving with regards to policymakers and the private business sector?
Yeah, so we are going to come up with a political risk report where we will gather industry players, and a big part of the target audience of that are companies in the technology and in the information communications technology space. So we plan to invite Facebook, or Meta, Instagram, ByteDance with TikTok, Google for YouTube, and many other companies who might be interested in the risks involved. Yes, we will continue the policy discussions. We feel that it's a continuing gap in the conversation in Philippine policy, how we can move forward with reforms in technology and in the digital space.
It's a big job, but a highly needed one. I hear you. And my second question would be, so the advisory group, your advisory group, is a practitioner of tech diplomacy in the Philippines, and your firm conducts research on fake news and the understanding of the digital landscape in the Philippines. You advise politicians on digital strategy. So when you say you conduct research on fake news, can you maybe just paint a picture of how severe or not severe, how fake news are being spread currently, and what sort of effects do you see? And do you see the political landscape reacting to it, and how? Because it's a global phenomenon. It's not obviously pinpoint to the Philippines, but maybe as you conduct research in the field, maybe you share your findings and what is the advisory, how to deal with it.
One of the maybe surprising facts about fake news in the Philippines is that we can be considered patient zero. The use of social media in the Philippines is really huge across the globe. In fact, you can see us in top 1 to 5 over the last few years of social media users. Facebook is the biggest platform being used here, but YouTube and TikTok are catching up. But because of that, and because of the power of social media, one of the most popular presidents to have ever been produced in the Philippines recently is President Duterte. His power is mainly drawn from his social media base and his ability to wield power and create an architecture for his political campaign in social media, particularly in Facebook. And so that was back in 2016. The digital campaigns, I think, was used in the US during the Obama campaign. And in a few years, that's just a few years away from 2016, where it was used extensively in the Philippines. And that's where a lot of the politicians saw the power of social media, and particularly President Duterte. So a presidency in the Philippines will have 6 years, a 6-year term. So from 2016 to recently, we had President Duterte using social media. So the group, WR Numero Research, the subsidiary doing opinion research, we did a project with the Harvard Kennedy School, funded by the USAID and the Asia Foundation, to study how human rights were being attacked by the state, and what tools they used. And a huge tool that they used, the way that they discredited human rights narratives to justify their drug war, was to perpetuate fake news. And so we found out that the government under President Duterte had a very coordinated and systematic and very rigorous strategy towards popularizing certain narratives, to the extent that mainstream news media, the engagement that mainstream news media gets as high as as the engagements that parallel media, as we call it, get in certain issues, specifically in human rights. So we know that one of the reasons why President Duterte is popular is because of his extrajudicial killings, and that's a human rights issue. And until now, international courts are trying to prosecute President Duterte. Mainly that's a political issue. But the point is, fake news is a huge issue in the Philippines, and the firm is involved in studying the way in which it's being perpetuated here by the state or by other government and non-government actors.
And you are actively involved in advising politicians how to fight.
Correct. So from the findings that they get from our research is being used to craft strategies to be able to fight the news that's being cast against them. One of the biggest receivers of fake news, of course, is the opposition, the senators and the electoral aspirants opposing the regime of Duterte and also the regime of President Marcos currently. And so in our conversations with them, we found out that there really is a recognition that they need to fight fake news. And so what we do is we try to tell them the gravity of the problem, and sort of the steps that they have to take towards fighting the
but
types of
since
attacks.
You've been talking basically about, you've been researching Duerte's take on fake news and on social media, would you say over the course of time that the people in the Philippines got more savvy to understand? Because we see, right, that governments, media, public the public is trying to educate people. How do you feel is the audience in the Philippines, has it gotten more savvy to request the origin of information? Do you see also a move there?
That's a wonderful question, actually, because there's a pervading. So we just did a presidential elections 2022. The opposition leader, the vice president, the former vice president, lost the presidency. But the prevailing conversation among scholars, among learned people, is that the reason why she lost is because the algorithm is to blame in perpetuating the narratives of her opponent or opponents. So that argument assumes that people have not learned from the lessons of the past, and that the electorate, still has a lot of room to grow when it comes to reading conversations and to understanding news sites, and whether they are relevant or whether they're useful for information. So it's still a going battle.
Especially with the use of AI, which is obviously a global topic, and use of deepfakes. So yes, it's still a big job to be done. Well, thank
Correct.
you on that. And then obviously I'm going to come to my next question is the tech companies. I mean, you gave an overview also of the tech gaps, but if we concentrate on the tech companies that are in the Philippines that are producing, in particular, the country's position in the global semiconductor industry, and how Silicon Valley should see the Philippines with unique market. So the Philippines are part of the global critical infrastructure. The US-based Semiconductor Industry Association recognizes the Philippines as a critical player in the global semiconductor industry and a major hub for semiconductor assembly and test manufacturing, right? So this is a fact. And so as a tech diplomacy network, we're gonna do a big day with the mayor of San Jose, and one of the big topics is semiconductors, because it's really relevant for San Jose. So of course, I've been thinking about you. And so how's the country set up to respond to this increased demand for highly technological products and semiconductors worldwide?
One of the biggest exports of the Philippines is not just it's really about people and individuals in the technology space. By that I mean people with technical skills like engineers and things like that. So the reason why we're able to be an assembly hub for semiconductors is because of the skills that are being developed by the Philippine government. So we have a lot of ICT focused schools and universities offering computer science and engineering and things like that. So this is becoming more popular for a lot of individuals, to pursue. So my point is, I think it's the education component, the training, the skills development dimension that the government is continually promoting and doing throughout the years. And so, when we think about the semiconductor industry, in the supply chain, there are countries producing semiconductors, but in the Philippines, what we do is really assembly. We can do much more in terms of manufacturing and becoming a place where we create the chips themselves. But right now we're really good at the assembly. There are a lot of companies who are given special economic incentives to come here. So we have what we call the Philippine Economic Zone Authority, in charge of giving tariff cuts, subsidies to governments, and to companies who might want to set up shop in the Philippines. So that's where we are currently.
And maybe can you circle back just for a second about the university structure? How are studies and how is that? Is that mainly free? Does it come with a tuition? Because it's a relevant, obviously, topic in the US about tuition, how high the tuitions are. And so how does the government interact and basically try to make sure that there's enough supply on technical talent?
So there are a lot of higher education institutions, and that it's highly subsidized by the government, but they're not as good as the private schools. So in that sense, if you'd want a good free education, you go to the state university, the two state universities that are good, University of the Philippines and Polytechnic University of the Philippines. But a lot of the better schools are still private, like De La Salle University, La Salle Network in the globe, in the world. You have Ateneo, the Manila University, and other technical schools like Mapua Institute of Technology. So point is, it's expensive, but it's not prohibitive. You can still get a good education with the private sector, with the public sector. But you also have another tier, and that's the technical and vocational schools offered by the government, training offered by the government. So the government invests a lot there, and you can get very quick diplomas and certificates in certain very specialized and technical fields such as engineering and computer science. So, but regardless of all these reforms, there's still a lot of education is still one of the ignored industries or sectors in the Philippine government. We aspire to be like Germany and Japan, right? Because in those countries you have very strong private sector and government related trainings, and there's really a lot of industry sort of feedback loop and partnership, and I think German universities are free, so we're not yet there. And to be able to get to manufacture BMWs or Mercedes Benzes, or in Japan, Honda and Toyota, we need to be doing more in education. But education is one of the biggest pillars in the technology landscape, basically.
For growth, I see. Thank you. And my very last questions, obviously, I cannot avoid that. The regional, the geopolitical tensions.
Right.
How far do they define your daily activities, your daily conversations? Maybe without dwelling too deep into it, but maybe that you give an overview of how the geopolitical tensions make their mark on the Philippines.
A fantastic question, Christina. The Philippines is in a very unique position. So we are part of what we call the maritime Southeast Asia, and so we're right in the middle of the South China Sea. We're an hour away from Taiwan, and a couple of hours away from Indonesia, Singapore, and Japan, and so we're really right there in the region. And that's where a lot of the tensions right now are, particularly with China and Taiwan. And Taiwan supplies 90% of the world's semiconductors. And so an impending invasion of Taiwan, we're not saying that it's inevitable, will really affect the global supply chain. And so the geopolitical risks involved with the tensions between the US and China is very much important for the Philippines too, because we might lose some clients and also we might, definitely anyone involved in the semiconductor supply chain will be affected by a takeover of Taiwan. And so it is part of the conversations daily. The United States has agreed that Taiwan is a core interest of the US, and protecting Taiwan against from China is a core interest of the US. The Philippines of the US is one of the oldest allies. In fact, our new president just approved new bases in the Philippines, 3 of which are facing Taiwan. So it's a really, really important piece of real estate, I guess, if you may, for this whole geopolitical competition between the US and China. I mean, there's a lot of things to say about that, but I'll leave it at that.
Well, there's a lot at stake, of course, and soon also the people in the Philippines will not only read about it, but probably with the basis then on the ground will feel the tensions. Well, we obviously hope for peaceful times ahead. And thank you for your high level and also going in more specific depth on some questions. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And
thank you for the opportunity, Christina.
And thanks for really sharing your geography and your insights. And well, we hope to hear more from you very soon. And have a wonderful day. Yeah, your day just started. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Good evening to you. Thank you.